Hey, what's going on YouTube? PB the Fox here with the Ravnica Historical Society, coming back with another video, and today we're going to be going over a bunch of different spoilers. They've just kind of popped up over the last 24 hours, so I kind of picked a bunch of them that looked really cool, and we'll talk about them quickly. We're going to start with Thunderbreak Reagent here, but we're actually going to start with the top comment. I'm going to zoom in so that you guys can read it on here. These jumpstart previews are a gosh darn mess. And I can't say I disagree. From what I can see, there are like a bunch of different just content creators, right? Websites and streamers and YouTubers and people who just write articles and have like Twitter feeds that do things. There are so many people who are getting preview cards for this, which is kind of cool, but it is a super big mess because I thought about this morning, and there's no place like somebody said, on the mothership, there needs to be a section in their image gallery for cards new to historic in addition to the digital only cards. And like there's a site that we actually have pulled up over here that we're going to talk about at the end here. We'll get to that. But the thing I don't like about that is that if you could just go on the mothership and click a link and see all of the spoilers that have happened so far that day, it takes away from the reward of getting to spoil a card. Like, if you think about it right now, the only reason that people know about Thunderbreak Reagent is because someone got to spoil this card, and that drove traffic to their content, right? Whether it's a Twitter feed or a YouTube or a Twitch or whatever the hell they do. It's cool and it's valuable. Like, if somebody came to us for the next set and said, hey, would you like to preview a card with the Ravnica Historical Society? I would be like, hell yeah. And if they said, oh, that's cool, we're also going to preview on our website, I'd be like, well, that's not really getting to do a preview then. Why would anybody look at my site or my, YouTube channel when they could just go look at the mothership? So I like the idea that in order to access this spoiled content, you have to go to those creators because it encourages people to look at them, and it definitely makes the spoiler feel more special to the content creator. And then also, like, why would Wizards care if you see the whole set before it comes out? Like, spoilers used to kind of be a cool thing where like a magazine would get them or some like really popular website, and then they would show up every day for like 2 weeks in one article per day, sometimes 2 articles per day on the Wizards mothership. The Wizards like main website. We used to call it the mothership. And like maybe the Magic Show would get one, maybe Star City would get one, maybe I can't even think of like the older, like maybe Dojo would get one from time to time. But like now it's so much different because back then it was really hard to get a hold of the spoiled content. So it felt really special when you found it. And it really was like kind of finding treasure. And that's sort of preserved in this method, even though it seems really messy. And I know people just give me the list of the set. Like, you'll get the list of the set eventually, but for a couple weeks before, it's really cool that you'll just get on Reddit and you'll be like, wait a minute, wait, Thalia's Lieutenant was spoiled? I didn't see that, holy shit. And like, it'll be this really exciting moment where you didn't just see it the instant it came out and then like it was gone and you were like, there was no excitement, right? It's kind of cool that like I just stumbled upon a bunch of these cards. Like, oh, I didn't know that was spoiled yet. Oh, I didn't know that was spoiled yet. So it's a lot more fun this way. And like I said, right, the set will eventually come out and you'll have a list of every card. So don't sweat it. And that point will come like a week before it's released on Arena. So like, it's a goddamn mess, but it's a cool goddamn mess. I gotta say, it's like playing out better than I think anybody could have anticipated, honestly. So with that being said, our first spoiler here, let's jump into it. Thunderbreak Reagent. Alright, so Thunderbreak Reagent, I don't think it's necessarily the best card. Like I said, these aren't in a particular order. They're just all open from when I found them. But I think this card's interesting and worth talking about because it's a cool 4-drop that you can put into mono red that I think is sort of... It's not amazing. It's not... Maybe not as good as like Chandra Torch of Defiance. I'm trying to think of other 4-drop red cards. Like it's hard to think of a place for this necessarily. But the idea is that it's a 4/4 for 4, and if your opponent shoots it down, they take 3 damage. So you can play it in a burn deck, and paying 4 mana for 3 damage is pretty bad. But in certain situations, your opponent might not be able to kill a flying 4/4 if they think you're on the burn deck. Like, it's a cool thing to bring in out of the burn sideboard sometimes when you think your opponent's going to go really light on creature removal. It also requires, like, a pretty spell-heavy burn. Like, I'm thinking more modern, right? In Historic, we have to play stuff like Viashino Pyromancer and Bomat Courier. And, like, our mono-red decks, even Hazoret, right? Like, we have to play a lot of creatures in the mono-red aggro. We don't just have a straight burn deck yet. But Thunderbreak Reagent is just kind of a cool card to go in there. It's not bad, right? I don't think it's going to make much of a splash in New Historic. But I wouldn't be surprised to see it in a sideboard or a main deck of, like, some kind of out there Tier 2 or Tier 3 red deck. We'll see. The next card I have up here is Nettlecyst. Pretty cool. Nettlecyst actually kind of bad. It's a living weapon that gets +1/+1 for each artifact and or enchantment you control. 3 to cast, 2 to equip. The only reason I have this card pulled up is because there's a few other cards that are going to fall under this category. It means that living weapon is on Arena now, which Nettlecyst, not amazing, but with Stoneforge Mystic, if that card ever comes onto Arena, like, we have a living weapon to go with it. And more importantly, we might get more living weapons. We might, I don't know about Batterskull, but maybe Cauldra Complete. We'll see. That's a really cool living weapon. Arguably, it's even better than the Batterskull, maybe. I don't know. I know it's seeing play in Historic for sure. But yeah, nothing special about Nettlecyst. Everything about just the idea that now living weapon is on the platform. It's pretty cool. The next one, I know this one's kind of old. This might have even been more than 24 hours ago. I don't think... It might have been spoiled when I was recording yesterday's video. But Thalia's Lieutenant, really cool. Kind of like another card we're going to talk about. When it enters the battlefield, it pumps up all of your humans. Or if it comes down quick, every human that follows it makes this thing bigger. So it's almost like a Tarmogoyf and an Anthem in one card. It's pretty cool. Doesn't do both things at once. Well, it kind of does, but it's a very solid step forward in the humans department. I know people really want to do tribal humans, especially because we have what is it? Unclaimed Territory, which lets you... It's a rainbow land, right? People want Cavern of Souls. I don't see it coming. I don't see that coming, and I don't see Aether Vial coming quite yet. Maybe. We'll see. I definitely can't rule either of those cards out just because of what they seem to be willing to do to Historic. But I don't think they'll be in this release. I think Thalia's Lieutenant, though, is a great step toward like a full-fledged humans deck because we already have a lot of really good humans on Arena. So we'll see. We'll see what other love humans gets this set and where it ends up toward the end of spoiler season. Next card here, let me zoom in, Bogardan Hellkite. Nothing special about this card. The only thing is that this is a Dragonstorm finisher. You play 4 Bogardan Hellkites in your deck, you flip them up, and they deal 5 damage divided as you choose. It's also pretty cool because this can be comboed with, I forget the red dragon, Terror of the Peaks or something like that. But it's just more comes in damage off of Dragonstorm so that you can instantly win the game without having to rely on the combat step. This doesn't go into any deck. Like, it was sort of good enough in the standard ramp deck, but it's just not good enough in Historic ramp. But as far as Dragonstorm goes, it's one of the premium finishers, so it's pretty cool to see it in the format. We'll see if Dragonstorm gets any stronger. Next, we're going to talk about a few cards here. Just the Enchantment Package. We got Sythis, the Harvest's Hand, which is a 2-cost 1/2. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you gain a life draw card. It is an enchantment, right? It's, what do they call these? Constellations or something. We get Sanctum Weaver, which is another enchantment creature. 2 mana, 0/2. It's a Serra Sanctum, basically. Tap, add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of enchantments you control. So instead of making white mana, you can make green or blue mana if you're in Bant. Starfield Mystic, this is already out on Arena, so it's not exactly exciting. I don't know. But it's just a very good card. And then the next one is Sterling Grove. If you don't know what Sterling Grove is, this is one that's actually making the deck possible. Move that just a little bit. Oh, wow, we're so far zoomed in. I'll get out of the way here. It's a 2-drop enchantment for green-white. Other enchantments you control have Shroud, which means you can't target them either. It's like the bad version of Hexproof. Nobody can target them with spells or abilities. Sorry. And then you can pay 1 and sacrifice the Sterling Grove to search your library for an enchantment card and put it on top. So, that combined with Sythis Harvest's Hand... Oh, Reprobation also on here. One in a... Excuse me, we'll go back to this. So with Sterling Grove, your Enchantress effect here gets Shroud because it is enchantment. And your Serra Sanctum has Shroud because it's also an enchantment. So, we'll talk about Reprobation. Sterling Grove is really the card that pushes the enchantment deck from, like, a pretty cute engine into something really seriously powerful. Because you're not only providing protection for the later pieces, we need Solitary Confinement, and then Enchantments is probably a tier 2, maybe even a tier 1 deck. It depends on what the rest of the metagame looks like. But from that point, right, from Sterling Grove, an Enchantress effect, and a Serra Sanctum effect that all get Shroud underneath the Grove, that's very, very good. Like, it's not that hard to build a winning deck around that engine. Reprobation also in here for 1 and a white. Enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a coward creature with base power and toughness 0/1. So it reads ugly, but this is actually the best white removal spell right now, I'm pretty sure. I would have to say that Declaration in Stone is probably still better for really aggressive decks to run as a 2-drop removal, but in any kind of control shell, this takes away all of the abilities from the creature. It changes the creature type, which can be super important sometimes, especially, like I said, if humans ends up being good, if merfolk end up getting really good stuff. I know there was a new 1-drop merfolk. I don't think I have it on my list. When it comes in, you can show a land to conjure a tropical island or something like that. Or trade a merfolk or a land into a tropical island, which is kind of cool. But that thing, I don't know if that makes merfolk better necessarily. If we get the, I forget what it is, the 3-drop merfolk. I don't know if it's a lord, but it's like if you have 3 merfolk and it gets wrathed, that thing lives. That thing will be really good. But so in cases like that, right, where you need to control 3 merfolk, changing the creature type on the thing that you target is very, very relevant. And then giving it base power toughness 0/1. It can still block, unfortunately, but this just does so much for the mana cost of 2, right, without having to pay like a full 3 to get rid of something. It's very, very good most of the time. Especially, right, like the control decks might get away with playing this instead of Baffling End, for example. But in our enchantment deck, right, when it's going to have Shroud, and it's going to draw us a card and gain us a life and make us more mana, and like, what else does this do? And it's going to cost 1 white, sorry, instead of... I'm getting excited. I'm really excited for this enchantment deck. I can't wait. I really hope Solitary Confinement is like a bomb that they surprise us with. Really good stuff in this pack, though. Very impressed by this. We'll move on. Something interesting that people were pointing out on Reddit. What is this? The Zombies pack, which actually has a lot of great stuff in it. This Putrid Goblin Zombie, Persist. Another card which my original thought was, well, that's just cool that Persist is now on Arena. Hopefully we'll get Kitchen Finks. That was my first thought. But as I read a little bit into people's comments, First Day of Class exists, which reads, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and it gains haste, which the haste is irrelevant, but the counter is important because old rules from 2008 when Persist came out. When this creature dies, if it had no -1/-1 counters on it, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a -1/-1 counter on it. So they persist back as a slightly weaker version of themselves. But the rules, a long time ago, established that if a creature card has a +1/+1 counter and a -1/-1 counter on it at the same time, they cancel each other out and they're both removed. Mostly to keep things simple, right? So that you didn't have to have a bunch of -1 and +1 counters on a creature. It makes more sense to just have them mathematically cancel and eliminate each other. But that's very interesting because in a situation like this, whenever Putrid Goblin dies, if you are on the First Day of Class, It comes back with the +1 counter and the -1 counter. They cancel each other out, and then you can kill the Putrid Goblin again. So, if you find yourself in a situation where you're on the first day of class and you can sacrifice your Putrid Goblin over and over, like with a Woe Strider, you can scry through your entire deck, and then if you've got something like Mayhem Devil, you can kill people. It's kind of an interesting way to turn on an infinite sacrifice loop. People were also talking about, right? Skirk Prospector gives you infinite mana with this. Siege Gang Commander can convert that mana into infinite damage. It's not the easiest combo to assemble, but 3 out of the 4 pieces can be tutored with Goblin Matron. It's pretty interesting, right? You can Matron up this, you can Matron up the Skirk Prospector, you can Matron up the Siege Gang Commander, and then like you literally just need to find first day of class and you combo off. Now, is that worth clogging up what's already like a pretty streamlined aggro deck in Goblins? I don't know, probably not, but there might be something to build around that, so we'll see. Moving on, our next card that we're going to look at is Dragon's Rage Channeler. This thing has been huge in Modern. I know this has basically changed the face of a lot of the aggressive decks. It's the new Delver of Secrets, I guess you could say. 1 red for a 1/1 human shaman. It's got well, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Surveil 1, which means whenever you cast your instants and sorceries, basically. Although it's your planeswalkers and everything too, right? It's actually non-creature. So it doesn't have to be a spell deck. It can be more of a mid-range card. You look at the top card of your library, and you may put it into your graveyard, which is already a good ability on its own, but the second half of this card has Delirium, which says as long as there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, which is what it means to have Delirium, Dragon's Rage Channeler gets +2/+2, has flying, and attacks each combat if able. So it becomes a 3/3 flyer if you can get Delirious. And with the ability to Surveil, you can dump lands, which is not as easy. Like in Modern, you just crack a fetch land, and you've got land in your graveyard. In Historic, it's not so simple, because we only have Fabled Passage, realistically. But with Dragon's Rage Channeler, you can just Surveil away a land, which is super useful. Getting an instant and a sorcery in the graveyard are pretty trivial, and having a creature die usually isn't that hard either. Either getting a creature or maybe an artifact, if that's like the way your deck's leaning. People are saying like, well, without Bauble, it's not going to be as good. But you don't need Mishra's Bauble to make this card good. I think this is going to be really great for maybe some kind of mid-range deck in Historic, or just straight up red aggressive decks. We'll see. We'll definitely see. Very interesting. Very, very interesting card. Super aggressive. Should slot right into a lot of aggressive red decks, and it looks like they made good on their promise that creature-based aggressive strategies were going to get a lot of love so far. I'm glad to see this one. And then the last card we're going to look at today is, I think it's translating into Kiora Wrath of Tides. Wrath of the Tides. The art on this super reminds me of, I closed it, of Loba from Apex Legends. Just this over, like, sexualization of the hips relative to the waist. And, like, it's a very, like, obvious, right? It's very ham-fisted pose for a character and design for a female character, I think. But whatever. It's not that bad. It's not. It could be a lot worse. It's just funny to me that, like, come on, guys. Like, Magic really didn't have to go down that route, but I guess, like, every now and then sexy cards pop up, and so here we go. These abilities, though. +1 ability. I'll read these from the side so we can still stare at the pretty card. The +1 side says, conjure a card named Kraken... What is it? Kraken Hatchling to your hand, which I'll pop that up over here. Let me jump this back in. So a Kraken Hatchling is a 0/4 for 1 blue. That's all it is. So the first ability is conjure a card called Kraken Hatchling to your hand for her +1. The +1 down here, untap a creature or land of your choice. Until next turn, prevent all damage that would be dealt and be dealt to and be dealt by that permanent. So it kind of does a Gideon. Untap target creature or land of your choice. So what you can do is attack with a creature and then use this +1 to untap it and block on the next turn, and it won't take any damage. But also, The way that this ability is worded, +1 untap a creature or land of your choice until your next turn, prevent all damage dealt to and dealt by that permanent. So if your opponent has a man land that's beating the hell out of you, a living land, you can +1 untap the living land on your turn, and then it doesn't deal damage next turn. So you might get somebody with untapping their land, and then they're like, what the hell did that do? And they animate it and attack anyway. I won't see that happening very often, but like, please somebody post a clip if the opponent doesn't understand. And then the -3 here is you may sacrifice a Kraken. If you do, create an 8/8 Kraken creature token. So the idea obviously being, you use the +1, put a Kraken hatchling into your hand, and then the next turn use the -3 to sack the hatchling and make an 8/8. A spike and a maul are needed to crack their shells, but the taste is worth the effort. And then they come back as an 8/8 and crack your shell open. Super interesting. I don't know exactly what wants this, right? Like, what? There's no real blue mid-range deck. We'll see how the metagame shakes out. This is a very, like, interesting card, but I think the abilities are hard to slot into the current metagame of Historic. A +1 that gives you a crab card in your hand, not that strong. Sleeping your opponent's threat is a little bit better on a +1. I've got to say, that's quite good. Very Gideon-esque. But then, like, the combo of using her to, like, every other turn crank out an 8/8, I guess is interesting. Because you've got a plus to put it into your hand, and then you've got to cast it. And then the next turn, you can minus and make the Kraken. I just don't see a deck where it, like, is filling a role that the deck needs. Like, that's only good sometimes in control matchups if they can't kill your Planeswalker, but pretty much all the control decks these days could kill this really easily, so I don't see it being good there. And there really isn't, like, a mid-range mirror where this shines. Like, just +1ing and making 0/4 blockers might be okay, but, like, there's better ways to deal with that problem than this Planeswalker. My gut says no, not a lot of play on this one, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. And then, yeah, so the last thing we've got here is just, there is, like I said, there's one website, MTGAZone. I'll link it below if you guys want to check it out. It is the, here, we'll even F5 it right now. It is the, like, one-stop shop to everything that's been spoiled so far. There were a couple things I wanted to point out on here before we got out of here. Some of them were old. Like, Ranger Captain of Eos, really good for the mono-white taxes deck. Being able to search up something that costs 1, which there's, like, a little toolbox, or even, this might make Death's Shadow a little better. It's kind of like Ranger of Eos, but it's the Ranger Captain. 1 less, gets 1 less creature, but you can sack it to prevent your opponent from casting non-creature spells. Very good card. We'll see if it pushes taxes ahead. It might. What else? There were a couple other things, like Endling was interesting, but this is just, there's no world in which a deck can play Endling and chooses not to play Phyrexian Obliterator instead. I just don't see Endling being anything other than a card that people like. Undead Augur here was really cool. Whenever this 2/2 for 2 zombie wizard or another zombie dies, you draw a card and lose a life. Just great for zombie combo decks. It's good to see that we're getting some pieces for that. I don't want to talk about the slivers too much. Oh wait, Goblin Engineer. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for an artifact, put it in your graveyard, and then sack an artifact to return an artifact 3 or less from your graveyard. I don't know if that's good enough. I don't know enough about the artifact combo decks with, like, paradoxical outcome and all of that. Maybe that helps out here. Maybe I'll do a whole video on the slivers. The quick version of my thoughts on slivers is that Cloud Shredder is really good, Lava Belly is okay, but until we have Aether Vial and some of the really good, like, if we can get Muscle Sliver and Sinew Sliver and Gemhide Sliver, and there's probably another one that I'm missing that's really good, but if we can get some, like, a 2 or 3 more really good slivers and then Aether Vial, I think it might be, like, tier 2. Very possible for slivers to come back at this point. Esper Sentinel, another card that's really pushing taxes the right direction. Whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, your turn and their turn, draw a card unless they pay X, where X is the power of this, so usually just 1. But Esper Sentinel fits really well with Luminarch Aspirant, which can put this, you know, 2, 3, 4, not only making it harder to kill, but making sure you're basically always going to draw the card in the late game. What else here? A couple new things I've sprinkled in, so let me just come through real quick. I can't tell if this is as good as in Soul Artifact or not. It's definitely slower, but maybe it's good enough. You guys let me know. Wonder, super interesting. It'll be cool if we get Anger. I really liked Thought Monitor here. I don't know if we have a strong enough affinity list yet to actually make this cheap enough to be worth it, but if we don't, it'll happen. And it's cool to know that we have Thought Monitor like waiting, ready to go. What do we have? Target player sacks a creature at split second. That's kind of neat. Although we already had, what's it called? Crows and Grip. Bloodbraid Marauder, kind of interesting. Breya's Apprentice is kind of cool. Unholy Heat's really good. Chitter Splitter is kind of funny. This thing's super powerful. I don't think Verdant Command's going to be good enough, but maybe. Coming right on through. Priest of Felrights we talked about at length yesterday. That video was great. Boom, boom. Nettlecyst, Batter, Bone. +1/+1 Vigilance, Lifelink, right? Not quite a Batter Skull. And then, what do we got? A couple more new things down here. Handwear Militia Captain, pretty cool for humans. I don't know if it's quite good enough, but I remember it being really good in Standard. Talked about Thalia's Lieutenant. Ninja of Deep Hours is cool. Ooh, Diagraph Colossus. That's another one that really good for zombie decks, right? It's almost like the Thalia's Lieutenant of zombie decks. When it enters the battlefield, this thing gets huge. It's kind of mirrored, though. Or whenever you cast a zombie, you make a 2/2, it's tapped, right? Yeah, put a 2/2 black zombie creature tapped into play. So it's a little bit opposite of Thalia's Lieutenant. Still really good in zombie decks. We talked about Bogardan Hellkite. Thunderbreak Reagent we touched on. Parallel Lives. I was really interested in this at first, and then I realized that we already have Anointed Procession, so this is just for Historic Brawl if we ever get it. And it looks like that's going to be it for today. Cool. And we get Tropical Islands. So yeah, really exciting stuff. Really happy with the power level so far. Interesting that they're doing Planeswalkers. See, the cool thing is, I think this is really weak and weird and doesn't fit anywhere, but it's a digital only card, so they can literally just patch this card and change it. They can make it get a different creature, right? They can change Kraken Hatchling to do something different. They can change the pluses and minuses. They can do something different with the ult. It's really cool. I'm excited, if anything, mostly for this card to see how they change it, because I don't think it's very good now. Yeah, so that'll be it for today. Thanks so much for hanging out and going over the spoilers with us. Let us know in the comments what you think is going to be most impactful so far. What are you guys so excited about? For me, I definitely like this Ranger and the Esper Sentinel. For me, those are super huge. The enchantment stuff, I know I'm going to have such a good time. I tried to build an enchantment deck for my wife. Like, I think Zendikar was the most recent set when I tried to build it with Chulane and all this stuff. So now that we have like proper Enchantress pieces, we'll see what happens, because we have Enchantress's presence straight up too. So we're in good shape. Cloud Shredder Sliver, pretty exciting too, even though I don't think Slivers is good enough yet. Yeah, I know, I'm looking forward to the next couple weeks. I can't wait till this comes out, because Historic's going to be so much more fun. Haven't got to play like a really solid tier 1 aggro deck in a long time, so I think that's going to finally get to happen. We will be back, of course, tomorrow with some more spoilers. Thanks so much for hanging out. I know this is a little bit of a long one today, but we're going to get out here and start editing it, so we'll get it up. It's already late, a little bit late today. We had some other stuff going on. I'll tell you about it tomorrow. As always, I've been PB the Fox with the Ravnica Historical Society. You've all been awesome, and we'll see you back here tomorrow on Thursday. Have a good night.